Welcome to the Deep Wealth Podcast, where you learn how to extract your business and personal deep wealth. I'm your host, Jeffrey Feldberg. This podcast is brought to you by Deep Wealth and the 90-Day Deep Wealth Experience. When it comes to your business deep wealth, your exit or liquidity event is the most important financial decision of your life. But unfortunately, up to 90% of liquidity events fail. Think about all that time and your hard-earned money wasted. Of the quote-unquote successful liquidity events, most business owners leave 50% to over 100% of the deal value in the buyer's pocket and don't even know it. I should know. I said no to a seven-figure offer and yes to mastering the art and the science of a liquidity event. 2 years later, I said yes to a different buyer with a 9-figure deal. Are you thinking about an exit or liquidity event? Don't become a statistic and make the fatal mistake of believing the skills that built your business are the same ones to sell it. After all, how can you master something you've never done before? Let the 90-Day Deep Wealth Experience and the 9-step roadmap of preparation help you capture the best deal instead of any deal. At the end of this episode, take a moment and hear from business owners like you who went through the Deep Wealth Experience. Margaret Agard is the award-winning author of 3 memoirs and former executive in the high-tech industry. She built a small website based on one product to $150,000 a month in sales, made it turnkey, and then sold it. She is also a wife and the mother of 8 grown children. Welcome to the Deep Wealth Podcast. And wow, do I have a guest lined up for today's episode, which you are going to love. We have a former corporate executive. Not only a business owner, but a business owner who had a business exit and now a thought leader and an author. And today we're going to be focusing on my favorite area of both life and business, really the art of business, the art of life through mindset and different ways of approaching that. But I'm going to stop it right there. I don't want to take the wind out of your sail, Margaret. Welcome to the Deep Wealth Podcast. An absolute pleasure to have you with us. And Margaret, there's always a story behind the story. So I'm curious, what's your story, Margaret? What got you to where you are today?
I was an executive in the high-tech industry, one of the few women, and I was a single mother with 8 children. And a few were in college. Yes, a few were in college. And yes, one wonders. And the rest were in high school. They were pretty close together. So I had to bring in quite a big income. And at the same time, the high-tech industry was changing. This was back in the early 90s. And so I decided to finish my degree. Up till then, you just had to be smart and good. And I was smart and good, but people were going after, they were going public. And then you had to show some credentials.
Sure.
And so I decided I only had a couple of semesters left. I'd finish that degree in math. And so now I'm going to school full time. I stopped being an executive for a while and just started a consulting business. So I had more freedom. And I, of course, had the 8 children. And I knew how to set priorities. I knew everything about Covey's quadrants and your A's and your B's. And any one of those jobs could have been a 24/7 job is how it felt. You know, being a full-time student, starting a consulting practice, and being the mother to 8 children. But I would set priorities. And I was getting maybe 4 or 5 hours sleep a night and waking in the middle of the night in panic. What haven't I done? And it seemed that whatever I did, not always, but often enough, turned out not to be necessary. This was back before the internet classes. And so to turn in a paper, you have to show up to class. And I'd come in with a paper only to see a note on the door that said the professor was sick and he wouldn't be getting the papers till the next week. And I think if I'd known, I could have used those hours doing something else, right? Or the same thing with a client. I'd come in with a proposal and they'd say, you know, we were just talking this morning. Forget that proposal. We want to go a completely different direction now. And again, I'd be thinking, well, I could have used my time in other ways. If I'd known, if I only knew the future, that's kind of how I was thinking. If only I knew the future. And so then I thought, because I do believe in God, even with a degree in math, I thought, I know who does know the future. And I think some people might refer to that as a kind of universal intelligence or connecting with their gut or something. And So what I started to do is basically say, looking at my to-do list, speaking out to the divine, your higher power, whatever you call it, what do I need to do today? That was my first question. What do I need to do today? And as I looked at my list, I could think, I don't have to do this. Now, this was not my brain saying, what do I need to do? That list is what was on there. I had said, this is what I need to do today. Now I was looking at a higher source and saying, what do I need to do? And often things would get crossed out and a couple of more things would be added. And if I only focused on what was on that list, if that's all I did, I was finished every night by about 8. After a couple of weeks, I could really learn I could trust this process.
Right.
And I was getting more sleep. And if it looked like things were going wrong, I think, but I knew this was how to do it. So if I was running late, and I lived in the DC area at the time, so who wasn't, you were either a half hour early or a half hour late because either traffic was great or it was all backed up on the freeways around DC. I would think there's probably going to be something happening on their end too. They'll probably apologize to me because they're late, which is exactly what would happen over and over again. And so it completely changed my life in terms of stress and what I was accomplishing.
Wow. And Margaret, before you continue, and this is fascinating, we're going to delve into this. For our listeners out there, I know we probably have 2 camps of listeners. One camp is saying, yes, Margaret, that's exactly what happens to me, and I follow something similar, tell me more. And there's the other camp that's saying, hey, Margaret, are you having a rough day today? What are you talking about? This stuff is woo-woo. And I'll share with everyone who's saying, I don't know, sounds sketch to me, that what Margaret is sharing with us, call it what you want, the universe, God, higher intelligence, science is now calling it the quantum field. And science is showing that through the quantum field, and this is all the physics and those complicated formulas and everything else, not only is it there, but to Margaret's point, and we'll learn more about this, all of us have access to this, and we have the ability to have our inner world, our thoughts, really affect and effect our outer world. So I'll just put that out there for our listeners who are saying, I'm not so sure. Keep an open mind. Let's listen, and hopefully you'll come out with a more broader and open perspective than what you came in with. So, Margaret, you tapped into this higher intelligence, the quantum field, God, higher intuition, higher power, whatever you'd like to call it, and your life was never the same, but for the better.
Yeah, for the better. And it was interesting because often I was asked to do something that I thought would come I should do, and I would think, I don't know how that relates to what my goals are. But when I did it, it somehow turned out to be exactly what needed. As I said, I was finishing my degree and the thought came that I should somehow add environmental sciences to it. I just wanted to be done. I didn't want to add more. And I had to actually go get into a course that was a higher level course. And even as the professor was signing the paper to let me get into the course without taking all the things I was supposed to have taken before, he was saying, I don't know why I'm doing this. And later, I did use that. As my life changed, I actually ended up writing software for and running global warming scenarios out of my home so I could work at home, a connection that I wouldn't have had if I hadn't taken that course. So it was odd how my life began to be rearranged. But I think the most important thing that happened was that actually I was getting enough sleep. I was not worrying anymore. And I was, in a sense, getting more done.
And so tell us about this. And by the way, for our listeners, Margaret has put together 2 wonderful books. In the show notes, we'll have a link to the books. So it'll be a point and click. And Margaret, I hope I'm not letting the cat out of the bag and saying that you're working on your next, and we'll be very excited to have that published. And hopefully we can revisit once that's done and talk about that. But Margaret, so tell us about the system where you now have, I'll call it peace of mind. You have a sense of what to do, what not to do. And it's being guided by a higher intelligence. And maybe before we continue with that, for people who are intrigued and say, wow, give me some of that. Where do I start? Sign me up. What would be coming out of here an easy, actionable takeaway that if they started doing this one thing today, they can open themselves up to start getting that peace of mind and that just assuredness and that ease and joy that can come into life?
I was originally doing this in the morning. So what I would suggest doing is in the evening, because I don't know about you, but at night, if I wake up, I'm thinking about what I'm going to be doing the next day. And then I'm really committed to it. So I don't like my plans to change. I don't care who's changing it, whether it's God or the universe. I don't like to be micromanaged. So I found it's best to just do it at night and have it there ready, the things you've crossed off, or maybe a thing or two you've added. So that's your plan for tomorrow. Then just do it. And the hard part, Jeffrey, is trusting, because often I have one short experience to share. I can remember I got up and I had written down that on Mondays, at this point, we were shipping some product out of our home in the internet business. On Mondays, I did orders. And that was always first on the list, do the orders, because it was small enough. We were shipping out of our home at that point. Then one day it was, no, don't ship the orders. And I honestly thought, well, I don't know how things work in heaven, but let me tell you, down here, when I say orders ship next business day, they're going to ship next business day. Okay. So I'm shipping the orders. And I spent probably a couple of hours doing the work to get them ready, and went to the post office. And as I remember, it was President's Day. When you're working from home, you're not thinking about holidays. So the post office wasn't open.
Of course.
So yeah. So don't ship the order made complete sense at that point. And I've had other experiences where I just thought, I don't know who you are talking to me, but you're wrong. And it turned out I was wrong. So I learned to trust. That's how I put it. I learned to trust.
And so, Margaret, I'm curious, because you were sharing that even back when you weren't on your own in your own business, you were in the corporate world, in high tech, I imagine a stressful environment, go, 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 let's make things happen. This is something all of our listeners can relate to. They're running their businesses, something very similar. Was there a change in approach or mindset that you had to do, that you became really almost like a radio station where you're now receiving these, I don't know if it's thoughts or feelings or a sense or these impulses, do this, don't do that? Did something change on your part to begin to experience that?
Just the fact that I had asked, most of us are just ripping along, doing our thing and writing, have our plans in place, and we're just heading right down the path we're sure is right. But when I began to ask for that outside influence, that higher intelligence, and that connected into what you called quantum consciousness, I did have a different attitude. I did begin to trust, and I was able to take actions that, as I said, turned out to be the perfect thing to have done later. I remember I did have a radio show for a while. It's been about 10 years. And I actually talked about this then and asked people to share their experiences. And one woman said that in her job, it had been during the time when they were laying a zillion people off. And so you're doing 2 or 3 people's job in the same amount of time. And she said, every hour. I said, what do I do next hour? It was just so much on her desk. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Wow. As you're talking, and for our listeners, we've all heard the expression, if you want to make God laugh, tell God your plans. And I say that because every one of us, every listener, and for myself, I'll put myself under the microscope. I'm thinking back now, Margaret, and I had these grandiose plans of how everything was going to work out and what was going to happen. And it never happened that way, at least not for me. Maybe for other people it does. But here's the beauty of it, because the universe, it's so intricate and it's so much bigger than any one person, that what I thought at the time would have been a big achievement or goal, looking back, was actually small. And yes, had failures along the way, challenging moments. But what was ahead for me, truth be told, I wasn't ready for it. The success was waiting for me, not the other way around. I had to go through these trials and tribulations and the School of Hard Knocks. I had a few PhDs I got from the School of Hard Knocks along the way. And only then, once I was ready, did success suddenly appear many years later. And it sounds like it was something similar for you.
Yes. And here's the other thing, which is why I like to say, are you running too fast down the wrong path or really hard down the wrong path? That we eventually, I left the computer industry and we built a business that at the end it was small. We were doing about 75,000 in profit a month, 150,000 a month in sales. And by then we had a shipping company and people doing the work for us. And it was sell that business. I want you to focus on this message and this book. This is where I want you to be. It was the thought I had. When I stopped saying, what do I need to do today? And started saying, because again, I feel as if I'm talking to, the creator, what do you want me to do today? And I suppose the same thing could be said about reaching out to universal consciousness. What do you want me to do? Or I think Ben Franklin said it. He said, what's the highest good I can do today? Was the question he would ask. What's the highest good I could do today? That's wonderful.
Margaret, as you're talking through this and you're sharing your experiences and stories, let's go back to the beginning for business owners. And this is my thesis anyways. And if you don't agree, you can kick me under the virtual table here and say, Jeffrey, I don't agree. And it's not really like that. But for me, if you take it to the most basic level, any business, when it starts or when it gets out there and it's really ramped up, its singular purpose, when done well, is to help society, help other people, solve problems. And so from that perspective, Margaret, when we think of it through that lens, how can I be of service today? It's not about me. It's not about what I want. It's what do my customers want? What does the marketplace want? What does society need that perhaps it doesn't have that I can help with? So it's really getting into alignment with a much higher purpose, pun intended or not, take it whichever way you want on that one. What would you say to that?
I agree. I worked with a dealer channel, and I can remember one of the dealers, one of our most successful dealers, saying to us, people just want to know they're loved. And other dealers were saying, and this is an interesting thought, which I think people should keep in mind, we would track who had the highest customer service rating of our dealers. And there was one dealer who worked really hard to get it back to people the same day they called. And he kind of made a promise along that line. And people were upset with him because he wasn't able to. Where another dealer said, we will get to you within 48 hours, unless, you have a critical emergency. And they had the highest rating. They had the highest rating because they set the expectation. And don't expect this for 48 hours. So be careful what expectation you set. And I'm totally off topic, but that's okay.
Yeah, that's great. And, as you're saying you're selling your business, I was thinking, geez, I guess it wasn't meant to be or ordained that our paths didn't cross because we have a whole lot of things to say on selling the business. But when you put this process, the quantum field, God, higher intelligence, into selling the business, which in and of itself is a whole ordeal, what happened for you? What was that experience like for you?
Jeffrey, this is so funny. I'm like, half your audience is going to be like, sure. And half is, that'd be great. I wish that would happen to me. But what had happened is I really felt like it was time for me to focus on my books. Okay. And I was having a hard time convincing my husband to sign the papers that we could sell the business. And everything was in place, except we had one last little thing that had to be put in place where the orders could flow smoothly. Without anyone having to massage the data at all. And that last thing was put into place. And so I finally said to my husband, our business was actually starting to go down. It had pretty much grown 20 to 30% a year consistently for 10 to 15 years. And now it was sort of going down. And I said, we're either going to sell it or it's going to die. But one way or the other, I'm going to end up not running this business. And then I said, I wonder if you know what it feels like to do everything you know how to do and it's still not working. Actually, I went off to a writer's conference, and when I came back, he said, I think we should sell this place and we should move to Florida. And I was like, how are we going to pay for the place in Florida? Because we tend to live out in the middle of nowhere, and we try to we look for places that are losing population so we won't end up with malls around us, right? That's our plan. Sure. And so I was like, it could take us a year to sell this place. And he said, we'll sell the business. And I said, are you saying we can sell the business? And he said, yes. And I had already contacted a broker. So I was like, bam, I emailed them. We talked. We had the paper signed that day. And then I said to God, listen, I think we might have a problem selling the business if what it's looking at is that it's losing sales. We should probably have the sales going back up. That's how I felt, right? And I've done everything I know how to do. And so I actually got this card out. I still have the card because it was so funny, in which I wrote down, I did the whole, like, think about what you want. What do we call that? I've forgotten. Whatever that popular term is. So I'm going to put down what I want in October, November, and December so we can sell the business. This is at the end of September. And as I'm writing it on the card, this thought comes very clearly: don't limit me. Don't limit you. So I've turned the card over and I wrote on the back, don't limit God. And then I just taped it up to my monitor. And the next thing that happened was a thought, oh, in our case, it was Facebook ads. And so it was, you need to do a better job on your Facebook ads. And we hired someone to help us do a better job. And our sales, they went up 10 times.
Wow.
10 times. And now here's the thing, you know this, and I know this. You could have your sales go up 10 times for 4 or 5 months, but you can't sell the business for that because you don't have a track record of it being up there. And at the same time, the thought came, I'm going to turn this business around so fast. It's going to look so easy. You are going to be tempted to keep it. Don't. So we sold it. We did make some good profit. We made 3 or 4 years worth of profit in those 3 or 4 months, and then sold the business for, its original base. And I have never been so happy in my life. Let's get rid of that business. And it sold in about 3 months for our asking price. And the people were thrilled because, of course, they were making a whole lot more money than they expected. Let me just say something about people who sell on the internet who are reaching out to people. Well, you're selling a higher business, but some are selling smaller ones or working with smaller ones. When people signed up for our product or our site, we would say, we like to share what works for people in this industry. Is there any particular industry leader you follow? And they would give us names. And then we would target followers of that industry leader with our ads and then track how many we sold of our product there. So it was a good question to ask as a kind of a welcome aboard.
And you know what, Margaret, as you're talking through this, so we're going to take it from the quantum field to the boardroom and work with me on this, both yourself, Margaret, and the listeners. I mean, Margaret, really what you're talking about here in corporate talk, and you've been there, the high tech and everything else, this is no different when you think about it than a mastermind group, or you're having an offsite planning session where yourself, perhaps some company leaders or area leaders, you're all sitting around a table. Some people call it brainstorming, whatever you'd like. When you think about it, the next set of growth strategies or strategies in general for the business, where are they coming from? They're coming from people, obviously, yes, but it's coming from people's creativity, their imagination. Where does creativity and imagination come from? So you can see where I'm going with that. So really, from the corporate boardroom to the quantum field to everything else in between, when you take off the biases or the terminology, I'm not seeing much of a difference. And I hope for our listeners, they're starting to see that as well. But Margaret, let me ask you this. So your first book, In His Footsteps, I gave my to-do list to God and got more done, more sleep, and less stress. And let's start there because this is really the book that started it all for you. So when you put the system together, so I can just picture myself or my listener, as you're saying, it's the night before, and I know you talk about your yellow pad in the book as well, whether it's a yellow pad or my phone or a journal or whatever it's going to be. It's in the evening, perhaps right before I'm going to bed. You're saying, I'm writing out a list of potential things to do, but before I do that, there's one poignant question that I'm asking, correct?
Yes. What do I need to do, or what do you want me to do?
What do you want me to do?
Whatever you're thinking, how you think. Yes.
And I don't want to assume. So when you're asking, what do I need to do? What do you want me to do? Are you really coming in with a clean slate in your mind of you're putting aside all, I got to get this done and that done, and just seeing what pops into mind? Is that really what we're looking for here?
Usually I have a plan in place because I like to do my work, my part, but I'm willing to change the plan. That's what it comes down to. And so, yes.
Okay, so to get a little granular here, so you have an idea for tomorrow. First, you have a plan, and you have some semblance of an idea for tomorrow. Okay, based on my plan of where I am right now, here's what I can see myself doing tomorrow. And then you ask that question, and then is that when you're getting the sense of what to focus on and what to not focus on?
Yes.
For you, it's a feeling, or is it just inspiration, or what's going on?
I would call it that gut feeling. I kind of
Okay.
know around my heart and stomach, like as I'm looking at it, I'm thinking, no, I don't need to do this. I need to learn to connect with that. But having once learned to connect with that, it becomes pretty straightforward. And a thought will pop in. I remember I've talked to some people who said, if I think of a person I haven't thought about in years, I know I need to reach out to them. And so a thought will come in. I've just asked the question, right? What do I need to do tomorrow? And a thought pops into my mind. I assume that's the answer. So I write it down, even if it seems strange.
So no matter what the thought is, you're not putting any, oh, let me think about that. Let's talk this through. Boom. It's just, you write it down, off it goes. And Margaret, I'm wondering, within your community, your readers, the people that you've spoken with, is it the same for them, or does it vary from person to person in terms of how they feel these things, or they get these inspirations of what to do or not do?
A lot of them say they have the same experience. They've learned how to connect that way. And I say, I don't think this wouldn't work for this. Other people say they get their answers in dreams, but I'm like, I don't think that would work with my to-do list idea. But people are different, and you have different ways of going through life.
It's interesting. Margaret, again, this is just N+1, my theory here. I suspect, when we're born, we're very connected in this way. And just over time, we lose that. And again, for listeners, Margaret was in corporate America, high tech, a leader, doing all these different things. And my goodness, if she can do it, we can all follow her lead and add this as well. I mean, what a difference that makes in terms of not only the peace of mind, but the difference that we're making, our ability to pay it forward and to change lives and be a force for good when we're following this higher plan.
Thank you. Yes, I agree. 100%. You just said my message, Jeffrey. Go for it.
And so, Margaret, so you started with your first book and you're talking about your to-do list, but you didn't stop there. And so then when you did your next book and the one that's coming from that, so your next book was In His Footsteps, Missions. We sold all we had and followed as God created, miracles and new hearts. So what was going on with that? What's the story behind the story on that book?
I thought it would be a good experience to not just fit God and the process into my life, but to actually turn it all over. Here, where do you want us to go and do what? And we did spend time working with men in prisons and working with inner neighborhoods, just helping people help each other, if that makes sense. They would own small homes and they would help each other. We taught them how to put on roofs, and it was a good experience. And it did change how I thought about giving. I'm kind of a lazy, selfish whiner person. I know it doesn't sound like it, but I really am. And often God would be like, I want you to fix a meal. And it was about, I don't like to cook, kind of like that. And yet, so that was the kind of thing where I was up doing stuff and looking forward to being of service. We learned a lot there. The third book, the one I'm working on, is about relationships. My second husband and I both came from some wounded backgrounds, and we had our triggers. And so I say we were put together by God because I had a 20-year plan that included staying in the high-tech industry, being in a growth industry. Now, this was in the 1990s, and one of the biggest growth industries at that time coming up was GIS. And the granddaddy of all places for GIS is a company called ESRI. And I went to work for them, and I knew they promoted women. I worked for a woman there. And I thought, I can stick here for 20 years. They're going to have to promote me because what choice are they going to have? Because as the companies are growing, it's like, she's here and she knows. Right. And so I'm going to retire in Fat City. That was my plan. And God's plan was, actually, you're going to get married again and stop working and go serve missions. And it was a terrible first year. It was like, how was this a marriage from you, God? That's how I felt. Like, if this is a match made in heaven, we're in trouble. But so it was more, how did we work that out and make what became a marriage that was healing to not only ourselves, but many people around us.
That's terrific. And, Margaret, as you're sharing your stories, my wheels are just turning, and I'll share with yourself, I'll share with the community. It's a story I don't really talk a lot about. It's very up close and personal. And it's involving the world of M&A. So imagine that, the world of M&A, which many people say, listen, that's hardcore business. It is what it is. All this quantum stuff, universe, there's no role for that. I got to tell you something. tell me that again after you hear the story. And so here's a quick story. So myself and my business partners were in the midst of our liquidity event. And without going into the details, the event blew up. It was dead in the tracks. It wasn't going forward. And myself and Waleska and Steve Wells, the three of us, felt so deflated. And I remember we had this phone call and we're talking. Steve was in a different city. And so this is pre-Zoom days and on the call. And I said, I've just been thinking and I just feel in my heart, guys, let's just let it all go. What's going to be is going to be. And we're all spiritual people. For myself and Waleska, Steve, we call it God. Other people may call it the universe or something else. But we said, let's just leave it to God. And if it's going to happen, it's going to happen. And if it's not, it just won't. And I got to tell you, as soon as we did that, because up to that point, Margaret, we were working hard, but not smart. And the harder we worked, the worse it got, because we had our own ideas. We're smarter than anyone else. We've got this figured out. We'll do it. And anyways, an already overly long story short, what I'll say is once we let go, once we recognize this was not for us to figure out, not for us to do, and I know it sounds a little bit out there, the moment that happened, the next day things began to happen. And the next day, and the momentum picked up. Wow. And the rest is history. The deal was done. It was a very large deal. The members of the community know all that. And the deal got done in a way that, looking back, in my wildest imagination, I would not have been able to put it together the way that happened. And so I share that for the listeners and for yourself, Margaret, to say that what Margaret's talking about may sound science fiction or out there for you, but I got to tell you from my own experience, and Margaret, we've had scientists on the podcast and doctors and thought leaders and other best-selling authors in this field, and they all share the same things. And again, our inner thoughts form our outer world. And when we can recognize, hey, there is a higher intelligence who, egos aside, is a lot smarter than all of us and can figure things out and can put things together, that's where the magic happens. And so, I want to thank you for having me remember that, going back all those years of what was a transformational event of essentially doing what you're doing. Okay, how can I serve the highest good? What do you want me to do today? As opposed to what does Jeffrey want? How should things happen according to Jeffrey? So what you're saying is so spot on.
And that is my way of doing it, Jeffrey. My way of doing it is to do it day by day. A lot of people are like, I want to turn my life over, but I have dishes to do. Okay, so there you go. I have to pick the kids up from school. Yeah. And so what I found is, by the way I was turning it over, a lot of things I didn't need to be doing went away, and the things that needed to be or should be done or that would bring the greatest joy and the greatest service were put on my plate. And I guess I say, even though I hate to be micromanaged, I basically gave in to being micromanaged because our days are our life, right?
Absolutely. Our days form our weeks, our months, our quarters, our years, and people tend to underestimate. They underestimate what we can actually do consistently day over day. And as people, we tend to overestimate what we can do in a year. So go figure that. So Margaret, before we start wrapping things up, again, I'm thinking of our listeners who may be new to this entire area and this concept, but they're open to trying it. So if you could, and you've been very gracious with us and patient, and you've shared it a few different times, but one more time for our listeners. So coming out of this episode, the listener is saying, yes, okay, you know what, Margaret, I'm going to get the book, I'm going to read it, but I want to try it tonight. Before I go to bed, I'm going to be doing this whole system. Can you walk us through one more time what that should look like and what we should be thinking about when we're going to put this to our benefit, the world's benefit, and to serve our higher purpose? What would that look like starting tonight?
I would write down my plans for tomorrow. If you know how to connect to this universe, this universal intelligence or God, then just sit there with him and her, it, and look through that list and think, yep, this, no, that. And if you don't yet have that, then I would ask, help me to know how to hear this. That's what I would ask. Okay, if you're out there, universal intelligence or God, help me to know how to hear it. And then I would still do the same thing and just trust the answers that you get. If thoughts come into your head, assume they are coming from that. And it's not your ADHD acting up. It's actually coming from this higher source.
So really, don't overthink. In fact, don't think. Stop thinking. And I like what you said, have trust, or in other words, have faith that what you're hearing is coming from the higher source, and don't overthink it. Write it down, and that's the direction that you'll go in.
Yep.
Well, some terrific advice there. So, Margaret, let's start to do this. We're going to start wrapping things up, and I'm going to be in a situation where I'm so privileged and honored. I get to ask every single guest this question. So it's a fun question. Let me set this up for you. Think of the movie Back to the Future. And in the movie, you have that magical DeLorean car that can take you to any point in time. So, Margaret, I want you to now imagine it's tomorrow morning and you look outside your window. Not only is the DeLorean car there, the door is open and it's waiting for you to hop in. So you can now go back to any point in your life. Margaret, as a young child, a teenager, whatever point in time it would be, what are you telling your younger self in terms of life lessons or wisdom or, hey, Margaret, do this, but don't do that? What would that sound like?
I would probably go back to myself in my late teens and say, you don't need to worry. You don't need to worry. Yeah. You're going to have children. You're going to go ahead and focus on your degree. Go ahead and focus. Don't worry. It will all be fine. Because I think I spent my whole life worrying that I was doing it wrong, that I wasn't going to get there. And I think I'd probably tell her about the to-do list and have her start earlier.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
Terrific advice. So for our listeners from the source and the higher source, there you have it. And Margaret, one other question for our listeners who are interested in reaching out, perhaps asking some questions, where's the best place online that they can find you?
I do have a website with a contact page. I'm also on Instagram and Facebook, and the website, inhisfootsteps.com. I have links to my Instagram and Facebook accounts there. I do have a newsletter that I send out once a month as I'm working on this final book. And links to the books and the audiobooks are there. If you like to listen, I have them as audiobooks. And I say, go ahead and sign up for the newsletter because you're not going to get spammed. I am old and tired and lazy. And so I get out one newsletter a month and that's it. And it's a short one.
Oh, terrific. And, for our listeners, it won't be any easier because it's in the show notes. So it's just a point and click. So come to the show notes, point and click, and off you go, deepwealth.com, podcast@deepwealth.com, and we'll have it all there for you. Well, Margaret, it's official. It's a wrap. And a heartfelt thank you for your insights, your wisdom, sharing your system, being so open with us. And as we like to say here at Deep Wealth, please continue to thrive and prosper and to stay healthy and safe.
The Deep Wealth experience was definitely a game changer for me.
This course is one of the best investments you will ever make because you will get an ROI of 100 times that. Anybody who doesn't go through it will lose millions.
If you don't have time for this program, you'll never have time for a successful liquidity.
I mean, it was the best value of any business course I've ever taken. The money was very well spent.
Compared to when we first began, today I feel better prepared, but in some respects, maybe less prepared, not because of the course, but because the course brought to light so many things that I thought we were on top of that we need to fix.
I 100% believe there's never a great time for a business owner to allocate extra hours into his or her week or day. So it's an investment that will yield results today. I thought I will reap the benefit of this program in 3 to 5 years down the road. But as soon as I stepped forward into the program, my mind changed immediately.
There was so much value in the experience that the time I invested paid back so much for the energy that was expended.
The Deep Wealth experience compared to other programs is the top. What we learned is very practical. Sometimes you learn stuff that is great to learn, but you never use it. The stuff we learned from Deep Wealth experience, I believe is going to benefit us all.
I've done an executive MBA. I've worked for billion-dollar companies before. I've worked for smaller companies before I started my business. I've been running my business successfully now for getting close to a decade. We're on a growth trajectory. Reflecting back on the Deep Wealth, I knew less than 10% what I know now. Maybe close to 1% even.
Hands down, the best program in which I've ever participated. And we've done a lot of different things over the years. We've been in other mastermind groups, gone to many seminars, workshops, conferences, retreats, read books. This was so different. I haven't had an experience that's anything close to this in all the years that we've been at this. It's 5-star, A+.
I would highly recommend it to any super busy business owner out there. And deep wealth is an accurate name for it. This program leads to deeper wealth and happier wealth, not just deeper wealth. I don't think there's a dollar value that could be associated with such an experience and knowledge that could be applied today and forever.
Are you leaving millions on the table? Please visit www.deepwealth.com/success to learn more. If you're not on my email list, you'll want to be. Sign up at www.deepwealth.com/podcast. And if you enjoyed this episode, if it added value, if you walked away with some new insights and strategies, please leave a review on your favorite podcast channel. Reviews help us reach new listeners, grow the show, and continue to create content that you'll enjoy. And as we wrap up this episode, as always, please stay healthy and safe.